Hi, everyone. Welcome to Trade the Chain. I'm your host, Ryan Gorman, and I'm here with the Market Rebellion dynamic duo of CJ and Monty. Guys, thanks for joining.
Of course. Thanks for having us, Ryan.
Absolutely. And Alex sends his apologies for not being able to join. He's frolicking on the beach in Brighton today.
That's a sight to picture.
Yeah, right. So, a quick rundown on today's show. We have big moves in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and our hot or not list includes two coins that made huge moves upwards, plus two other coins that aren't doing so well. And plus, we have some huge news from both the retail and the institutional world. But first, let's get to the big boards and find out what happened this week with Bitcoin and Ethereum.
What a week. Truly, what a week. I mean, this is
Look
this
at all
is
that
the type
green.
of price action you wait months for.
Right? I mean, that's parabolic. At the, that move upward, I haven't seen a move upward like that since what? Like the big run up in 2017?
Yeah. And the reason why I'm starting with the monthly chart here is because we had such a parabolic week. I just kind of want to zoom out for perspective. And looking at our previous macro cycle during 2017, if you follow the sequential indicator, you see that we had three of these green 1 through 9 cycles until we ultimately went extremely parabolic and then came very close to topping on that green sequential 9 on the monthly in, what was that, like November, maybe December of 2017. Here we're doing something very similar, although you can tell we're still very early on in the parabolic cycle. We haven't even made it yet to a 1 to green 9 candle on the sequential indicator. We're on the 7 on the monthly. So what I'm seeing from the long-term perspective is that the monthly and weekly charts are incredibly bullish. And going into the next 2 months, I think it's possible we could even make new all-time highs. And looking at the month or on the weekly chart as well, you can see that we're just getting into this bullish momentum with a nice massive green 4 candle on the weekly chart that we experienced all throughout this week. So,
sorry, do you think that's purely based on the hype from this week's news from PayPal, or do you also think that the U.S. election is playing part in this somehow?
Yeah, I think it's definitely both. I mean, inflation is such a huge concern, and like there's so much ambiguity around this election. People are just looking for a way to hedge against the economy crashing. So Bitcoin is the answer to that. I mean, we saw Paul Tudor Jones on CNN saying that Bitcoin is the best hedge against traditional financial assets. So I think that was huge and like really speaks to the legitimacy of Bitcoin. So yeah, I think both of those played a huge factor in this run up.
Okay.
yeah. And just to add to that, like markets don't move because they want to. They move because they have to. And we had like a burning uptrend of higher lows throughout here. And once you get past this prior candle swing high on the 9, this was actually one of our trades in our service for our members, was a long above the previous swing high on this 9. So when you have breakouts into new highs in territory like that, after you experience a series of higher lows, that sets up for a very explosive move, regardless of the asset. And then you add the fact that it's Bitcoin, and you have all these fundamental factors like PayPal, like Paul Tudor Jones. He's my favorite trader of all time, just to say. But the cool thing, and the thing that's even more unique about Bitcoin is that it's not just an inflation hedge. The thing that Paul Tudor Jones said is that I didn't realize this when I first bought Bitcoin, but I found out later is that it's almost like investing in a tech company because you have this contingence of incredibly smart people like Steve Jobs or like Bill Gates, like what they were early starting out. You have this contingence of people working who all have an incentive to make the network better and have the price go up. So it's kind of like you get best of both worlds where it's strong enough to still see a potential decoupling if the stock market were to crash because of the election. But if we keep going up, Bitcoin can continue to perform like a tech stock. So it's incredibly versatile, and it's almost like the perfect trade right now.
It's interesting that you mentioned a decoupling from the stock exchange, because a lot of people have been starting to wonder what's driving it upward, and uncertainty around political instability and uncertainty around the elections it would make sense that the stock market would go down, especially if there fails to be a stimulus deal and COVID experiences a bit of a resurgence, as is apparently starting to occur here in the U.S. So going back to that comment you made earlier about Bitcoin possibly challenging a new all-time high, if it does go in that direction, is there a range that you think it might settle in, or a price target that we can look towards for that all-time high?
Well, we never can know how high bubbles go, which is why it's very difficult to say. If I had to say roughly, I would say 50 to 100,000.
Oh,
very roughly.
All right. And do you think that'll happen this year?
I think by 2022 or 2023. I think we still have some time, but I think as far as macro models go, that's the current point we're at and what it's setting up for. And the stock to flow model was one thing, but now you have all these fundamental factors coming together that make things very, very interesting.
That would be interesting indeed. A 50 to 100K run upward. That would be remarkable. In terms of Ethereum, with DeFi hype kind of dying down a bit, we know that the largest crypto assets tend to move in tandem with each other. Do you think this week's move upward was, a rising tide lifting all ships as Bitcoin went up, or were there other factors at play?
No, I think it was definitely that. I mean, we saw so much just talk about Bitcoin, even outside of crypto circles. I mean, like we mentioned, Paul Tudor Jones mentioned it, and even like Dave Portnoy was mentioning it on his Twitter. So I feel like people saw that. I mean, we saw all the coins rise, not just Bitcoin and ETH, but I mean, pretty much every token, like you said, every ship rose with this tide. So yeah, I think just the elation around crypto right now and the promise in the space kind of drove everything up.
Do you think that the positive sentiment, it makes sense for the positive sentiment around Bitcoin to remain, but do you think the positive sentiment around ETH continues as it looks like there has been some profit taking?
Yeah, no, I think so. There definitely is some profit taking going on, and that's what you'd expect to happen after a 9 candle like that. I mean, that's a pretty ridiculous run up, but what's really going to be interesting here is to see where it gains support. We got those moving averages below it, setting up for nice support, and also 400 is a great number for support. So we're going to have to see like what happens with these next couple candles. I think it's going to be really important. But what CJ spoke about earlier with Bitcoin and how you have a contingency of smart people working on it, I think that same exact thing applies to Ethereum, almost more so. And I think once people kind of realize that and realize that there are so many investment opportunities associated with ETH, I think it will go up in tandem with Bitcoin when that run up that CJ talks about does happen. But in the short term, yeah, I think there's going to be some profit taking that might drive it down and test some of these support levels. But yeah, I'm still bullish long term, definitely.
So can I just ask you guys a question, because this is pretty this is a pretty largely debated topic in the space, is that Bitcoin is actually going to decouple from altcoins and is going to be, the only true cryptocurrency, kind of the thesis of the Bitcoin maximalists. It's like, do you really think when billions of dollars of speculative money comes into the space, it's going to go into just one asset? It's not what the market has shown us, and it's not how the market has behaved. When more money comes into the cryptocurrency space from traditional markets, from speculators, wherever it comes from, it initially goes into Bitcoin, and then it gradually filters out into some of the altcoins and other highly speculative assets. That has not changed since 2017 or 2016 when we first saw altcoins and ICOs. Do you really think that we're going back into a contractory period where altcoins don't exist? Do you think that's something that could be practical? Because it's just not what the market has shown us.
I think it makes sense for there to be some consolidation. As markets mature, redundancies are taken care of through M&A, and efficiencies are realized. But I just can't see the markets contracting to only Bitcoin. That feels to me like people just talking their book and wanting that for their own personal gain. No reasonable person expects everything to disappear and Bitcoin to just be the only cryptocurrency or only digital asset.
Well, I just have to ask, because there's quite a bit of people in the space who think that way and hold that opinion. A lot of people whom I respect. So just wanted to ask you guys, but.
No, of course. I mean, I think, there's always going to be a contingent of people that believe something that the majority doesn't. There are people who believe the earth is flat too. So vocal about it. So that doesn't mean that they're right, and it doesn't mean that the Bitcoin maximalists are right. I mean, I think there's a little bit more time for them to be proven right, though, than there are for flat earthers. That said, talking about some of the these projects that are working where that are being worked on, where real value is being brought to the space, brings us to our hot list. And users of Trade the Chain at tradethechain.com received an alert this morning about 3 hours before EASY.FI shot through the roof after Binance announced that it was listing the token in its innovation zone. Can you break this down for us, guys?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of it has to do with what you mentioned. I mean, or sorry, you didn't mention it yet, but that Binance listing of EASY.FI is just, I mean, that's huge. Binance is the largest exchange in the world. And whenever a token gets listed on Binance, it tends to go up. And if you can get ahead of that news, I mean, that's key to kind of picking the next key coin. That's one of the biggest things, is kind of the availability of it, and it really increases the just liquidity of the project in general. And yeah, that was big news, and I wasn't surprised when the price shot up at all.
I mean, it went up over what, like 140% in a 3 hour span, something like that. I mean, that's a remarkable move upward.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and like I said, if you can get ahead of that news, I mean, it's pretty hard to do, but yeah, that Trade the Chain alert went out, and sure enough, when it got listed, massive spike in price. So
that's why it's great to have a fundamental metric as well as just going by technicals, because fundamentals do drive cryptocurrency very often. And this particular case is almost like getting in before a company IPOs. Like if you had shares of a company before it went public, that's kind of what this is. It's kind of also similar to what we saw with the Coinbase effect back in 2017. Now, since they've added so many coins, that effect has kind of been mitigated, or just it's not as strong, I guess.
Yeah, it's watered down a bit,
but it's just inconsistent. Like it's hard to bet on. Back when they were going to add Bitcoin Cash, like that was ridiculous. Price went to like $4,000 or something just based on that listing alone. So these are very opportunistic if you're close to the organization, or if you know that this is going to happen. And to have an alert system that will make you be on the level of those insiders, it's a very useful tool, in my opinion.
Indeed it is. When you're able to realize 140% gains in only a few hours, you are definitely outperforming the market, the broad market anyway. And another token outperforming the market, Voyager. There's been partnerships with Tracy McGrady and Charlie Shrem that have helped push positive sentiment, and a recent announcement about awarding an extra 1% interest rate on top of what's already awarded to holders of VGX. If they're holding more than, 10,000 Voyager tokens, it's worth about $1,500, right? Do you think that's what's behind the recent surge upward?
Oh yeah, that's definitely the reason. I mean, we've talked about the fundamental news, but this is like a little bit different. This is added utility to a token that already had some utility by providing interest on for funds held on the app. But that boost is huge, and it kind of like previously you were really only incentivized to hold Voyager by getting more Voyager token. This allows you to get more payouts of other tokens. So I mean, you can hold Bitcoin, and if you hold more than 10,000 VGX in your account, you'll get that 1% boost. So you'll get 4% interest as opposed to 3%. So yeah, I think people realized that this was kind of added utility for a token that was looking for that. And yeah, and we saw that change in price reflected. So.
And as you mentioned earlier, as we were talking before the show, aside from like Binance Coin, where you just get no trading fees, there's much more utility to this token. It's like a cashback rewards like credit card in a way. Like holding gives you more, and it has far more utility, and it makes sense that it would surge upward like this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, I was having this conversation with a coworker and he was saying to me, CJ, if I didn't have 3 kids and a wife, I would have no funds in a traditional bank. They would all be in Voyager because of these interest programs. And because of Voyager, because they've added this ability to have interest rates and have a 1% boost, you can actually earn up to 9.5% on USDC just sitting in your Voyager account. That is better than any bank you're going to find out there. And it's just it's showing that Voyager is truly becoming what it says it wanted to be, which was the financial services firm of the future.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing that reflected in its price action. And the thing about why I have such positive optimism on Voyager is because this token has so much potential upside. And if you look at just historic price action and where it went before it had any utility at all, it went all the way to $15 over the course of 2017 and 2018. Right now, we're talking about a big upswing to 15 cents. And so when you talk about risk reward ratio in the cryptocurrency market, I see the highest potential coming on Voyager because one, it's backed by a legitimate business that's been doubling its revenue each quarter. It's adding more utility to its token fundamentally. And we're starting to see a rally in terms of price action, especially on the weekly chart. We just reached this red 8 on the sequential. So essentially this green 1 is the 9. It is the sign that we're starting to reverse and go back. Now, I think Voyager's topped temporarily on the weekly or on the 4-hour chart. You said we see we've hit a 9 here, and now we've kind of been coming back down and correcting. I think we might even go lower to this this gray level here at around 13 or 14 cents. Nevertheless, fundamentally, people are waking up to this value in this price action. And the cool thing is, I don't even think Americans have really woken up to the true potential of this cryptocurrency because all of these massive pumps occur at like 7 to 8 p.m. Chicago time, which is when Asia is getting up and when their stock markets are opening. So even more upside potential, and like I'm very bullish as you can see.
Absolutely. And when you look at the average U.S. savings rate at a bank, it's below like 3%, 0.3%. It's absurdly low. So if you have an asset that you can hold that pays 9.5% backed by a legitimate business and is reasonably liquid, I mean, the opportunity set and the potential for the coin to grow is massive. And if it's gone temporarily downward and corrected a little bit, that looks to me like a buying opportunity.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely.
So we move from our hot list now down to our not list, 2 tokens that aren't doing so well. One of them is Compound. Since hitting an all-time high of 270 back in September, it's declined quite a bit. What's going on there?
Yeah, right. I think this is just an instance of like, so we saw that all that elation going on with DeFi and that massive run up. And yeah, a lot of that wasn't backed by actual utility. So in the last month, we've seen this steep decline. And it's just, I mean, it did actually bounce a little bit back with all this positive news, but also the technicals were there, right? So it hit this red 9. That was also a bit of a doji candle. And I wouldn't ordinarily recommend catching a falling knife like this, but in this instance, I mean, everything was lining up nicely. I mean, you had all this positive news around crypto in general. The price point here, it dropped below 100 for the first time in a very long time, making it a good buying opportunity for people that didn't get in on it initially. And I mean, I think a lot of people have been waiting a long time for this to finally settle into a range that is more appropriate for its utility. And I think it's starting to find that price point. So like I mentioned, it hit that red 9. We saw a nice bounce back to like above $105, like 107. So I think it might settle in this range a little bit as we see other cryptos rise. And there isn't too much profit to be taken here, right? Because not too many people got in on this. So I think this token may start finding its true price range.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, these things are like, they're like IPOs, but worse. in terms of how the market should value them. So it's a learning experience for us and for the market.
Absolutely. And another asset that's been a learning experience for some investors has been Filecoin. You know, they recently upgraded the network to let miners collect some block rewards without a vesting period. You know, one would think that it would perform a little better, but it hasn't. I mean, look at that drop; it's almost off a cliff. What went wrong?
Yeah, that is a death spiral if I've ever seen one. And this is just an instance of, from what I've heard, is that the project wasn't able to keep the miners happy. And the miners are the backbone of the blockchain. So without them, there is no price action. Price action doesn't matter if the project is dead. And before this upgrade, the miners were allegedly on strike. And yeah, there were lots of red flags here. But a lot of people weren't lucky enough to know about all this stuff going on with the miners. And if you were just a holder of this token, you probably got burned pretty bad. This is a project that may not recover just because of all the things I mentioned. But like you mentioned, they did put out an upgrade that essentially offers 25% of block rewards up front to miners. So it kind of was just a way to appease the miners that were driving price down and threatening the legitimacy of this project.
Yeah, this definitely doesn't feel like one of those instances where you're going to buy the dip anytime soon.
No, I wouldn't touch this. No way.
Not with a 40-foot pole. Moving on to this week's news, we have one massive story and another rather large story. PayPal entered the retail crypto market through a partnership with our good friends over at itBit and Paxos. Giving over 300 million people access to Bitcoin, to Ethereum, to a handful of other crypto assets is massive. And the sectors that PayPal serves: remittances, merchant services, payments, online commerce. I mean, this is huge. What impact do you see this having on the markets going forward?
So yeah, all those things you just mentioned are huge factors. And I mean, it's just several fronts that this is like going to affect the crypto space. So you have all these users that will now have access to paying crypto. That's huge utility. That's 346 million people that are buying who knows how many things a year. All those things could potentially be paid for in Bitcoin. That's massive. And then there's the much more macro perspective of, I mean, that's getting a foot in the door for vendors and merchants to start allowing more things like this to happen. And also just the legitimacy that this provides. I mean, PayPal, it's kind of been a long time coming. It feels like that they've been, I mean, at first they were kind of directly opposed to this, but now they've come around as they realize it's largely profitable. And yeah, I think this is huge news for so many reasons. I'm really excited to see kind of what follows.
Do you think the hype from this will stick? Because Bitcoin is it's very hype cycle oriented. CJ was talking earlier about potentially challenging all-time highs. Do you think it'll be off the back of this, or do you think it'll be more macro related and factors that are external to the blockchain and crypto industry?
Well, I think it's hard to say, right? We've kind of been waiting for like a catalyst to spark, like be that spark that would provide more institutional confidence and also more legitimate businesses like PayPal to start getting into the space. So I think this may be a domino effect here, but it may take a while. I mean, PayPal kind of had their business model aligned to do this already. Mm-hmm. So there's not too many other companies I think that are ready to make that switch. But I mean, in the short term, that's huge news. We saw it reflected in massive price action. And I think these prices will stick for now. I think there's a lot of reason to be positive besides this news. And I think the technicals are there to kind of sustain this rally for a bit.
Yeah, and I think, going back to some of the other news that came out yesterday with PayPal, the rumors that they're looking to acquire BitGo. I mean, that just further shows, if that deal does come to fruition, that just further shows their commitment to the space, kind of, turning on a dime and really going all in after not too long ago being rather effusive about not being part of or not enabling use of crypto on their platform. Cool. So you spoke about the institutional front, and we had some news there as well. The London-based prime broker Bquant launched derivatives trading and separately managed accounts for institutional investors. You know, derivatives and SMAs are, they're hallmarks of traditional markets. You know, asset managers use these to hedge risk, to manage strategies individually for sophisticated investors. And, you know, this just goes to show that the pipes are in place, the products are there, and that wall of institutional money, it's only a matter of time until it comes in.
Yeah, looking at like not only this piece of news, but as well as the PayPal bit of news, it's just like a very collective kind of movement where society kind of moves towards a particular idea. You can see that services, corporations, they're offering financial products that are more in line from the traditional markets that are now being implemented into crypto, so that, you know, if you build it, they will come. And we're seeing a lot of those examples. And this bit of news, as well as the PayPal news, I think just adds to that overall collective movement.
Yeah, we always talk about how important the institutions are, right? Like that capital is so important to the space. And when we see new injections of institutional capital, that's when we see most of the price action happen. I mean, the reality is that like the everyday trader isn't necessarily making up all of this price action. This is largely dictated by massive movements. And I think that, like you mentioned, the derivatives and the SMAs, these are all things that giants in traditional finance have been waiting for to get into this space. So I think it's, it's a huge step, and I'm excited to see more capital come in through these avenues.
I couldn't agree more. The future looks bright, at least for crypto. And hopefully we have some more good news in the not too distant future. All right, guys.
Agreed.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. This is Ryan saying goodbye with CJ and Monty from Market Rebellion. And check us out at tradethechain.com. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you.